is Memorex Memories, and you're listening to the Paradise Arcade.
The Paradise Arcade may contain explicit content. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to the Paradise Arcade with Eric and Kyle. All right, welcome back, listeners, to another episode of the Paradise Arcade. This week, we're doing it a little bit different. Kyle could not join us. He had a goth club incident the previous night, so I asked my good friend Matt to step in. Hi, Matt.
Hi.
And then we're interviewing someone I'm very, very excited about having on, Sean, AKA Memorex Memories. Welcome to the show.
Oh man, you're making me blush over here. What's up? What's up, guys?
What's up? So I'm going to be honest. I'm super excited to have you on. We had a whole bunch of conversation before we properly started, which I think is all things that we could rehash. But I'm excited to have you on because you're one of those artists that when I listened to your music, it reminded me the first time that I heard Aphex Twin or Squarepusher for the first time.
Damn, bro, flattery will get you everywhere. Jesus, I almost swooned there. Whew.
So let me explain why. It's interesting.
Beautiful.
Because you were talking about some things about the reticence of being associated with the scene earlier in our conversation. Mm-hmm. What I really like about your music, and especially The Life of Riley, is that you take things that I think that people take for granted musically, acoustical sounds, or forgotten things, and then you do this really interesting twist with them. And in the same way that what Squarepusher did with using his bass in the music, or Aphex Twin incorporating all these different kinds of sounds, and doing something new and exciting with them, and also being very emotional at the same time. Life of Riley is a really beautiful record. So to do that with electronic music, and as Matt knows, is really difficult to get to move people emotionally. And I think your music does that really well. And again, it gives me those vibes of those early pioneers that are just great electronic artists who maybe escaped their label themselves, as we talk about whatever wave scene you want to say. So I'd like to kind of re-talk about In Motion, and we talked about some really great things early in the conversation about how the In Motion 1 and In Motion 2 are bookends of you as a person. So could you talk a little bit about how you started with In Motion and where you're at now?
Yeah, sure. But sorry, I'd just like to clarify, I'm very taken aback, but thank you so much. They were especially kind words. Very much appreciate that. My imposter syndrome is flaring up, man. As soon as you mentioned like Aphex Twin and Squarepusher beside me, I'm like, Jesus Christ, like maybe quickly close the tab and go hide in the corner.
Run away, yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, more than happy to kind of go over what we were talking about there, but effectively it was along the lines of I don't know what when actually sorry, I'm getting so tongue-tied here. I was gonna say like a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, I actually released a short video that kind of goes into a little bit more of the themes on In Motion 1, just because, like, I mean, obviously it can be a little bit lengthy, but for anyone that's kind of wanting to dive into that is there as well. That was a plug. That's how you plug your shit right there.
Yeah,
no,
good man. Plug away.
No, man. When I wrote In Motion 1, it was effectively like a chapter change in my life. Like, I had just started to see the world from a brand new perspective after like a huge battle with mental health my entire life. You know, you can say that, like anxiety, depression, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's very common as well. It is very common, but it was something that I feel like I had just begun to overcome. And I mean, like, from everything to being trapped in a job that you don't like, to basically being made to feel like a statistic, a number within your terrible entry-level office job, relationships ending, relationships changing, you know, like changing your social groups, like all of these things were all tied into that. And the title In Motion itself kind of comes from like a play on a couple of things. One basically just being fighting against complacency. It's very, very easy for when you're battling against all these things to just want to hide under the cover and really not fight towards it. But I always found it's like I've got to stay in motion. If I let complacency take over, then that's going to be me. I'm just going to basically the equivalent of like just laying there and rotting, and I didn't want to do that. So as opposed to letting all these feelings overcome me, I just decided let's just throw all of that into the music that I'm currently writing, which is why I don't know. And in Motion One, there's a I actually found this. It was a self-help cassette tape in a charity shop. I don't know what you guys call charity shops, like Goodwill or something, you might call them
Thrift
or something.
shops.
But in a charity shop, and it was a self-help tape. And the reason I found it really funny is for some reason it was brought out by Nescafe. It's in like the coffee brand, so it had like a Nescafe, and it was I think it came free at one point, like the 90s, with a pack of coffee. But
Nice.
I put it on just for a laugh, and then I was just like, oh, that could be a really cool sort of linking theme for In Motion One, is like to take all of these, you know, don't panic, you know, breathe, take these breaths, all this, and kind of lace that in with the themes of the album. But anyway, sorry, I just went on a huge ramble there. But effectively, what I tried to do with In Motion 2, after all of these changes, is I'm in a far more balanced place in my life, mentally, physically. I just feel in control, and it was just the idea of returning to those themes whilst in a completely different headspace, trying to recapture all that strange glitchiness and dissonance, but with just a far more positive headset. I actually feel like I described this infinitely better before we hit record. It's always the same, man. Like, you ever record someone in the studio, and then as soon as you hit record, you immediately fuck it up. I
Yeah.
feel like I just done that for like 12 minutes.
No, you did great. You did really, honestly, you did really great. Yeah. So that's a really beautiful and very personal story. I mean, that's got to be a little bit. At least there's not necessarily lyrics. I suppose they're singing on it, but it's still a very bare emotional place to give out to the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, my main objective in writing any music was I wanted to write something that, I mean, I know what Boards of Canada done for me, and I just wanted to, I mean, the pipe dream in all of this is to hopefully someday write something that means as much to someone as Boards of Canada meant to me. And that's what I'm going to continue to strive for, because that's it. It's like those guys gave me everything. Like they changed my life. The sounds, it just felt like someone scooped up all these weird sounds I've been having in my head and put it onto a cassette tape and fed it back to me. And I was just like, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life, is just make sounds like this. Um, so I mean, yeah, if you want to say it's a bit of a personal output, that's exactly right. Just because I mean that's what I'm striving for endlessly. But actually, like now that you mention that, um, I find that particularly in the scene, the I mean, no, I find it could be quite a few scenes actually. Now that you mention it, but a lot of modern music seems to try and scratch the itch of nostalgia. You know what I mean? That you hear that a
Mm-hmm.
lot. It's like, oh, it makes me think of a time that hasn't happened, or this makes me think of my childhood. And by the way, let me say that's one of the things Boards of Canada done for me as well. Like that feeling of nostalgia, that comfort blanket almost, that is a beautiful part of music to experience. Um, but I feel that one of the things that is overlooked in, like, well, at least from a music creation standpoint, is I know a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, the 90s, you know, especially with like vaporwave. I'd be like, oh yeah, the 90s. Look at the aesthetic. Look at Windows. You know, look at that. Oh, Windows 98. All this, you know, aesthetic. It's cool. I love those aesthetics, right? But a lot of people just, I don't think it's necessarily like, oh, the 90s were better, the 60s were better, the 70s were better. I think what a lot of people pine for is just that comfort, that looking back and being like, oh, that's something that's familiar. You always want to go back to your childhood, despite the fact that a lot of it may be romanticized.
Mm.
And that was something that I really wanted to kind of do with this. Where, I mean, here's a simple way to put it. How many of you guys have had a really shit apartment in the past that when you were living there, you were like, this is horrible? I mean, like, it's cold, windows don't work. You've got a really shit apartment, right? It could be many things wrong with it. But maybe a year down the line, you'll look back on those little parties or something that happened there and you're, oh man, that was good times.
Mm-hmm.
It's like before you know it, the times that you're currently living will be the good old days.
Yeah.
And see that idea, it's like you are, someday it could be the worst moment that you're in, but someday that will be a comfort blanket. It's like you're living the good old days as they are happening, and I just think that is quite an interesting thing to go for. It's like someday, a few years down the line, you're going to be like, oh man, like 2000, well, maybe not 20, maybe not 2020, fuck 2020, but you know what I mean? Like maybe you'll be looking back and be like, oh man, that was cool. I mean, I suppose as much as fucking lockdown sucked, you're probably going to have some kind of cozy memory from it to look back on. But yeah, so I mean, that was a long way of saying I do believe that you can create that similar pang of nostalgia with abrasive sounds, with something that's like a scratchy saw as opposed to just nice, delicate sine waves and that kind of thing and echo. I do believe that you can create this same, I don't know, satisfaction for nostalgia.
The boards of Canada are Scottish, are they not?
Yeah, from Edinburgh. Yeah, capital city.
Is there a? I'm imagining there's like a kinship also there, as far as, you know. Because I mean, I was a little disappointed when we were talking earlier, and you said you were 20. You said you're how old?
28.
so because when I listened to your music, the thing that I kept coming back to was like warp stuff. I mean, I just felt, I know that there's a whole you know, pile of subgenreification around synth music out there nowadays, chill wave or synthwave or whatever the hell you want to call it. I think you know, listening to it all, I kept thinking about, I heard a lot of Boards of Canada influence.
Thank you very much, man.
Big time. And then but also just like a lot of stuff, because I mean, when I was a kid, I would remember going to the malls and going to record stores in Cleveland, where I grew up. There was the Great Northern Mall. I used to go there, and they had a food court, and in the food court they had a record store called Record Den. And I used to go in there and just, you know, leaf through the stuff, just looking for things. And you know, I was in probably middle school when Nothing Records, which was Trent Reznor's imprint, started bringing all the warp stuff to the masses, basically. And I remember like finding, you know, I think my first exposures were probably Hard Normal Daddy and Richard E. James album, and then Awe Tecker came after that. And all of those, I always tell people, like, you know, my whole thing, I was born in 82. I mean, I, you know, grew up in the 80s, but I mean, all of my passion about making music came from listening to the warp stuff, especially things like Squarepusher and things, you know, of that nature, because I would be like, I understand what these instruments are. I know that's a bass guitar. I know that's a snare drum.
Yeah.
I don't understand how these things are happening the way they're happening, though. You know, they've been sequenced and edited and done. And I always the thing I loved about warp was that it was, you know, natural sounds made to sound unnatural, you know?
Yeah, that's one of the things I absolutely adore about Richard D. James or Aphex Twin. Is that, I mean, see if you you guys, like, if you've written music for a while and you've produced your own stuff, you are so unforgiving when you're mixing stuff, because you're like, yeah, I want it to sound like this. You've set a level for yourself. So naturally, if this is what you do for a hobby all the time, whenever you listen to other music, it's I don't know, personally, I find it a little bit difficult to, like, say, I'll go and listen to some Chemical Brothers, and the whole time I'm listening to it, rather than actually getting caught up in it, I'm like, how are they doing that with the snare? What EQ is that? Is that what compression ratio is on there? And for the most part, I can kind of figure it out, and then if I sat down, I could recreate it. The thing that I love about Richard D. James is whenever I listen to his music, I do not have a fucking clue what is going on from the get
Right.
go, and I
Right.
can just lose myself in blissful ignorance, just being like,
Uh-huh.
oh, there we go. I don't know, like, from, like, you hear a 303 for a second, and you're like, I have no idea how he made it sound like that. What's
No.
happening?
Yeah.
What time signature is this? Oh, who gives a fuck? It sounds great.
No, I mean, and I think that's exactly, I mean, and that was the vibe. I mean, I think, and you were talking earlier about nostalgia and how nostalgia, you know, there's a certain sort of clickbaity way of approaching nostalgia where it's
Mm,
like, you know, the DeLorean and blah, 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 and all
yeah.
that crap. But I think there's also like, I have memories around records for sure. I mean,
Mm.
another one I was going to toss out there, I don't know, Future Sounds of London. Like
Oh, yeah, man.
I felt like I heard, you know, sort of there's a certain level, there's a layer of texture and atmosphere that exists in the
Because
Future
those
Sounds of,
guys were like, they were like layering videotapes and shit for their
yeah.
production, weren't they? Like,
Well,
I'm
there's
sure, like,
no there, and I think that's part of like what makes making music interesting. I mean, we can all go on YouTube and watch all the tutorials and like
Mhm.
just make copies of copies of copies. But I think that
mm,
when you really start to crack the egg and look at the thing and go, okay, I understand that like anything is possible. I can do
yeah,
anything, you know. And when you start to realize that, I think there's a catharsis that happens as a creator. And I was curious about that with you, like, you know, what are the records that you go back to? Because for me, whenever I'm creating, I think a lot about the records that were super meaningful to me and the space in which they were. I mean, to this day, whenever I put on uh Autechre's records, I think about
mm.
walking to school, you know, because I had like a little
Oh,
disc man, and I used to pop my little CD in there, put my headphones on, and walk to school and listen to, you know, fucking pencil sharpener music. And my friends would be like, "What?" I don't know, because we're all like punk rock, you know, like everybody
Yeah.
had a skateboard and like played guitars in kids' garages and stuff, which I did all that shit too. But I was also
mm.
like, you know, when as soon as I found all that stuff, I just threw all that stuff away because I was like, I want to know how this works. Like, how do you even do this?
Yeah, I mean that was I think, like, I've always been a huge music fan, like, since I'm talking about, like, since before I could walk. I mean, my parents, they had a huge, like, collective music taste. I mean, every
Mhm.
day I would hear anything from, like, Vivaldi to then, like, The Prodigy. Like, my dad was an old raver, mum's basically like a hippie. It was an interesting combination, but we got a
Nice.
fuck ton of good music out of it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I remember, like, I think I asked for a guitar because I really liked music. I asked for a guitar. Um, Shock horror, I couldn't play the guitar like Jimi Hendrix immediately. So I thought, yeah, this sucks, and threw it away. And I thought, right, I'm never going to be a musician because I can't play this. I can't do it. Can't hold my hand right. Blah blah. But I still loved listening to music. I would occasionally like do like DJs and compilation things for people. But then I remember I heard Boards of Canada, and I was just like, "Oh, this sounds great." Like, I mean, that understatement of the century there, but I was like, "This sounds unbelievable." But then I actually looked a little bit more into the production behind Boards of Canada, and I had no idea there was these sequencers and drum machines and samplers, and you could set up things so they would be triggered along to, if you know the timing, you can set it up to do the timing. Can you think of the sound? Here are synthesizers that can make these sounds. And I was like, wow, I don't need to have perfect time. I don't need to have like classical ability. I don't like, if I just spend enough time and work on this at my own pace with sequencing, I can put it together. And that blew my mind. I had no idea that's how music was made. I just assumed it was like all the samples you were hearing. I just assumed that they were being played and recorded. I had no idea you could. I mean, and then that with hip hop on top of it. I mean, Jesus Christ! Between Boards of Canada and Jay Dilla,
Hmm.
my head was split. I was like, "This is unbelievable."
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I had no idea you could make music that way at all, and I'm so happy I found it.
Yeah. I find it Matt, and I think you tied into something that's really interesting because Matt and I are a similar age, And it's the same thing of listening to the Warp stuff and discovering Warp for the first time, and that the fact that like it brings me exactly to that where I was saying before. It reminds me the first time that I heard the nostalgia piece, Aphex Twin or Squarepusher, for the first time, because I grew up in the Midwest like Matt, and you have a kind of certain this is what the music is, and then when Warp came over, it was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Again, you don't have to have perfect pitch. You could craft and create these songs, and that's such a
the variety of noises as well, with these strange other world. It's like whenever you hear about artists, like I don't know, back in the day, like 70s, 80s, when they got a hold of like their first synthesizer, and they were just like, this is the sound of space, this is the sound of the future. You hear all these possibilities. I feel that Warp just updated that for us, where it was like these just like high frequency crunches and clicks brought together but used as like drum fills, and just it just blew my head open. Like a lot of it, it's like you're not even listening to it for the melodic value, you're just listening to it for this palette of sounds that's on display. And Warp, holy shit, like yeah. I actually have two original pressings. I have Squarepusher's Beep Street.
Yeah.
No, not Beep Street. Sorry, Port Rhombus.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
nice.
have that on the original. You know, the purple Warp sleeve.
Yep.
I got an original pressing of that, and then I also got LFO by LFO. I
Nice.
got that as well, and they're probably prize members of my collection. I also got
be.
fucking super rare one, man. I take it, you know, obviously Richard D. James has a unbelievable amount of aliases and pseudonyms that he played on the.
Yes.
You ever heard of Universal Indicator?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got Universal Indicator Yellow, and I have no idea how I came across that or what I paid for it, but I don't even play it. I just look at it every now and again and be like, just kind of nod at it approvingly, like, yeah, there it is.
I got this.
Yeah, I remember. I feel like Nothing compiled, or maybe Warp had done it. I don't know. They compiled a bunch of EPs, and it became Big Loda, which was the release in the States. And that was, I had heard Hard Normal Daddy, and then I got Big Loda, and I remember Journey to Reedom. When I heard that track, I was just like, okay, that was like a huge one for me, as far as like, okay, I get that there's breaks and there's all this instrumentation and all these things are happening and it's hyper edited, and I just fell in love with it. I mean, I probably to this day you could play that track and I probably still know all the snare rushes by heart, you know, because I just wore that thing out. And I think that kind of goes back into what you were saying before about there's an element of nostalgia, I think, from the perspective of being a creative, a creator of things, where all of that lineage adds up to whatever that experiential thing is that makes Memorex Memories possible, you know? And I always say, I always point out to people, I'm like, you know, you could right now go sit in Boards of Canada's studio and you wouldn't make Boards of Canada's music.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
There's a certain sort of lineage that goes with a space and equipment and experience and influence. You know, I always, for me, you know, that music from that time is, you know, heavily influential to me. And I always tell people, it's interesting because people will be like, oh, you know, you make synthwave music or whatever, so you must listen to a lot of synthwave. And I was like, I don't know, not really. Like, I think that, you know,
yeah, I'm the same, actually.
I tend to sort of just trust my gut and sort of make whatever thing is in line with what I'm feeling, you know. I was going to ask you, is, you know, when you made, at the point, I was kind of going through your Bandcamp when Eric reached out to me and was like, do you want to join? And I was thinking like, okay, I was familiar with your stuff, but not super familiar. And I kind of went back and started listening to a lot of it. And I was curious, like, so with what was the first Memorex Memories release where you curated it from start to finish? It wasn't just a collection of tracks. It was like, I have an idea.
Pictures of Purple Skies.
Okay.
That was when I actually had a theme and a running idea. So yeah, that was the first one where I actually had a theme. And now, like, for a long time, I just wrote singles. It was just the ideas, like, get single out, put out there. That is kind of what happened with In Motion the beginning, because I think Away Home and Thanks for Listening were already out at the time, and then it was just right, we can put them on there alongside the other stuff, and it happened to work. But with Pictures of Purple Skies, that was a thought out process. Like, I actually wanted like to tell a full story with that, hence why there's little intermissions on there. There's interlinking sounds of like airplanes and landing and street sounds and all that. And
Yeah.
some of that shit I even recorded on the street in Barcelona, like just as I was on there on holiday and stuff, like just some of the ambient noises. But now I don't think I could. In fact, I know I cannot write music now without a theme.
Sure.
It's like if I just sit down at the keyboard and try and hit stuff, I'm just going to get fed up and be like, look, this isn't worth it. You're trying to force it. I need to sit down with an actual idea, a terrible head movie, whatever, even like a title, whatever going on,
Yeah.
and work with that. But
It's
yeah.
funny. I was listening to Purple Skies, and it. Did you ever listen to Ian Pooley?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so there's this old like house guy who's sort of like a I don't know if he was part of French Touch or what, but he had a record where it was like almost like, because the thing I got from listening to Purple Skies was like it made me think of it, it was like a complete idea, but it was also like a journey. It's like a triptych, right? Like you're going from one space to the next, and it's about a journey that you took, like you actually took, right?
Yeah.
Am I off there? I'm making sure I'm
No,
right.
no, that's exactly correct.
So
yeah.
I mean, like I think, and I think records like that are really tricky, right? It's tricky because you experienced it, right? You went and did the thing, but then making an album that's going to convey that to somebody, right? That they're
Yeah.
going to really understand that space. And I remember like when I, starting out making records, one of the things that always terrified me about putting out a record that was a concept, and I'm the same exact way as you, like once I did that for the first time, I could never not do that.
Yeah.
But I remember very distinctly like sitting down and saying, okay, I have this concept for a record, it's really heavy, and then having a lot of like apprehension, or maybe just, I don't know what the right emotional context would be to call it, but like just a lot of fear about, is anybody going to get this,
Yeah, and well, I'll tell you another thing as well. Anyone who knows me will tell you that I've never really had a great deal of, let's say, national pride. I'm not exactly like very patriotic. I've never really been that type of person. But I'll tell you one thing, and that is over the past couple of years, particularly with In Motion 2. So we're talking very recently. It has actually instilled a little bit of God, I don't even know if you want to say like local or like community pride, and it's for all the wrong reasons, right? But I remember like I don't know, like see if you listen to the sound associated with like synthwave, chill synth, and that kind of thing, it's difficult to listen to a lot of it without thinking of like idyllic dusk sunsets. You think of like, I don't know what they got, a romanticized version of like, say, a Miami Beach or Venice Beach and all that, right? I mean, I'm in the UK, obviously. Like, you guys are from the US, you know that it's not this idyllic, yeah, we just live in the sunshine and everything's perfect sort of dude reality, right? But naturally, like, if you listen to that music, it's difficult not to kind of associate those two images. And I remember like I always thought it was interesting because I'm writing music with that kind of feel, but my surroundings are like a working class grey rainy shithole. Like, and I mean that's me. I wish I was being like hyperbolic there, but no, it's a really like sort of working class area. It was it had some notoriety. It had a legacy back in the time of the war because we had the shipyards, and then after that, it's just known for like fucking unemployment and knife crime. So I remember you just kind of being like, wow, for a while it was like, we need to escape. I just need to think of something to get me out of this place. Like, so you could write some music and you could escape. You could go to these idyllic purple skies, sit at these dusk beaches within your own head, and then, you could write this music. But I don't know, like, see that especially like, I mean, see if you listen to, say, established artists like Hotel Pills, for example, right?
Mm.
I know he's based out in Portland, but obviously like he has the palm tree, you know, that's the
Yeah.
logo, that's that sound. It's very sort of I don't know, there you go, idyllic American imagery, but obviously he is on the west coast of America, so that image isn't exactly too far. He probably sees it a lot more than, say, myself or another artist like Odlin. But I just find it interesting that we were, at one point we were all trying to like similar scene, similar vibe, but one half of us was nearer and the other half, it was almost like we were trying to simulate it. And I just find it quite interesting that even if you listen to myself or Odlin, there's still that like tinge of grey mediocrity. There's something, you can't go full out like this is Sunburst. It's like you can kind of feel that little bit of, I don't want to say darkness because that sounds pretentious, but you can kind of feel just that little bit of almost the concrete aspect of it. And that was I don't know, when I was writing In Motion 2 that time, like, see, just I just had thoughts of like the motorway, like, and I think I actually touched on this a little bit in that video, where I was just like, the idea that I started to play with was this whole area, all the families that live in this area, at one day will probably not be in the same houses. Some of these housing blocks may be knocked down. It could become a new housing block. It could be gentrified. It could just become like flat ground. It could become an industrial complex, you know. Someday this could all disappear, but the one thing that will always remain amongst that is the motorway or the highway, right?
Mhm.
That will always be the main vein through there because people always have to get to where they're going. They may rip down all these monuments of the past, these fancy old buildings, these like World War docklands, but they'll never remove that motorway. And I just love that idea that in some way it's like, do you ever
Mm.
see those pictures online where it'll be like a destroyed car in a field and a tree has grown like right through it? It's like
Mhm.
Yeah.
nature's overcome it. It just kind of felt like that was like the industrial like tree growing through it. No matter how that surrounding's going to change, that motorway is always going to be there. And then that just kind of, I don't know, took me back to when you hear Gary Newman, for example, in the 80s talking about how he was obsessed with Lovecraft and those
Yeah.
kind of books, or isn't Lovecraft, but I can't remember the artist, the author rather, but he wrote things like Clockwork Orange and High Rise,
Oh
Heard
and
yeah,
of
it's
it.
yeah.
just like thinking of that like
Mm.
near dystopian future, like that's what and it just kind of felt like for once it was like, oh shit, right, this isn't Thatcher's era Britain. This isn't that. I don't have any of that, but what I do have now is this. It just felt like I finally managed to bite my teeth into like, this is my modern dystopia, and it just felt really cool. But
I think
yeah,
I no, I totally love all that because I think that like the thing I think that a lot of people miss when you start talking about this sort of synth scene, you kind of I always look at it like it's an onion, you know, and you're peeling layers. And I think that when
mm,
you go down maybe 2 or 3 layers, and yeah, you get to like the 80s and Trapper Keepers and Slap Bracelets and all that
Yeah.
bullshit. But
mm,
if you keep going a little bit further, you look at how American culture affected American entertainment culture affected through the world throughout the 1980s. And
mm,
the thing that always strikes me about it is that a lot of that was escapism, just like you're saying. Like you look at
yeah,
the 80s and it's like in America there was a ton of shit that was awful. It was like,
Mhm.
you know,
mm,
Reaganomics, stock market was crashing, the AIDS crisis, um, and then you know, elsewhere in the world, the Berlin Wall. You have like all these things that
yeah,
are serious things, and I feel like if you look at that decade of art and film and music, so much of it was forward leaning because they were trying, like literally it's fantasy. I mean, you're
you're
trying to
looking
escape.
forward to getting out of it.
Exactly. And I think that a lot of that, you know, there's an influence. I think what makes the music that you make so resonant in that way is that you're clearly a byproduct of that thinking rather than a byproduct of some cool image that you saw on Tumblr. It's like
Yeah,
there's an emotional through line that exists there that means your music's only possible if you're emotionally channeling that through it. So
yeah, man.
yeah, and I think like, you know, as I went through and started listening to a lot of your stuff, like that was the feeling that I got was like that your emotional experience is all over that the music that you put out, and it makes it that much more genuine, you know.
Well, you know, I cannot tell you how much like that means to actually hear that, because I mean, you'll know yourself when you're writing music as well. Like they're all the things that you just hope that you can convey, and
Sure.
especially when you're working on instrumental music. I mean, I know it's difficult when, even if you're writing music that does have lyrics and all that. I mean, it's up to the talent of the vocalist to express it to get that feeling across. But it's particular when you're writing instrumental music. You're like, you know the reason you're writing this, you know what you're putting into that sound, but you just hope that it will translate to someone else that listens to it. And when it does, man, that is a special feeling. Like, I love reading messages from people and just hearing like what they think of my music, or what it's meant to their day, or if it's just lifted spirits, even if it is just for that minute. I live for that shit. So
Yeah.
it's
Well, it's
always
because
a great triumph.
well, I think it's because in that moment the music's not really yours anymore, right? Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
because I have similar experiences, like where people come up and say, "Oh, this record really meant a lot to me because it got me through this tough time," and it's
Mm,
like, in a way, in that music that they're talking about, that they're referencing, it may be something that was me processing a tough time in my life. I had to make that music because I literally had to.
mm,
And then for them to respond to it, that resonance, that's a bell that will ring forever.
mm,
And it's great because it kind of leaves me, it kind of goes off of my shoulders, and now it's with them now. And there's catharsis there. Like, I think it's a powerful uh it's a powerful process that I feel super lucky to be a part of, right? To just be able to make music and process stuff through it, and then for that to resonate for somebody else is amazing, just like you said.
it's a fantastic outlet.
Yeah.
It's the only outlet that I've ever known. Like, never been a sports guy, never known this, and I'm just so I think personally it's the best medium. I do love films, do love like the odd bit of television, but music has always been my go-to. Like, I just love putting on a record and just actually just getting caught up in it. But funnily enough, I think it's quite funny as well. Like, I don't know if it's because that's the way that I started listening to music, or that's maybe when I started fully appreciating music was through headphones. That I'm actually not someone that likes to listen to music super loud. I'm actually not even. It's going to be controversial, but I mean it's true. Never actually been the biggest fan of live shows. But I just think it's like you go there, it's like it's so loud, and it's just like it feels like, oh my god, I'm on the spot. Do I have to I have to show the people that I'm having a good time? Oh, and you're just like, when really, I just kind of like sitting in my room, comfortable, got my headphones on, and you can just kind of close your eyes and just go with it and really lean into it. But
Yeah.
like, yeah, like, I don't know. But I suppose that's probably why I make the music that I make, and I'm not making like slamming EDM. Like, just cause it's like, yes, we're having a good fucking time. Yeah, ooh, and you're like, no, I don't want. I'm not that person.
Well, and I think, like, going back to like talking about mental health, I think there's a lot of people in the EDM world that are not, they're making music that is primed, right, it's like a primer for social exposure. And
Mm,
then you hear stories about people that are just absolutely at the bottom of the barrel mentally, you
mm.
know. And I think that there's a lot of space, that doesn't get explored. And so I think that's what's really interesting about this whole, the ability to channel yourself through your work, and to be present within it, but also to be just hyper honest, is it's an incredible gift, and I think it's cool that it's something that you've felt, I don't know, comfort doing. Do you have anxiety about that, or is it just now, is it like that's just the only way you can be?
Well, I mean, I certainly don't think that the word confidence, or like, yeah, that's certainly nothing that I would associate with myself. I think I'm always going to have that worry, as I
Yeah.
said, that absolute imposter syndrome, where you're like, oh my god, when am I going to be exposed? When am I going to be found out? And I'm going to be like, yeah, we knew he was shit the whole time. I mean, that will never really leave me. But I will say, particularly over the past, say, year, maybe a couple of months, it's something that I just feel like my passion for it's just grown all the more, which is something that I never thought. Um, I didn't think it could deepen anymore, but it's just that we see, particularly now that I'm self-employed, and this is how I earn my living. And then I think about like back to when I was in those shitty entry level jobs, and you were made out to be a statistic, and you were like just made to like, oh, you're not essential. If you don't do the job and you're shit at it, we'll replace you tomorrow. And then you've like, so when you think about that, and you're like, oh wow, now this is something that I really, really care about, love more than anything on this planet is music. I can now like pour in like that energy into something that I love. It's like you're no longer going to the day job now. It's like, right, you've worked hard, and now you're here and you can support yourself, and you're like, why not get more passionate about it? So I mean, whether that be little things like how you do your promotional material, what visual aesthetic do you want, like how you want things put out, like making a schedule for yourself, like actually waking up early in the morning to go in and work on music for this amount of time, stop, you've got your breaks, not like look at it like, and now I'm just like I could not be happier. Like, I think for the last job that I had, I was a collections agent for Lloyd's Bank, which was basically like you call up people who are unfortunately behind on their mortgage and harass them to pay it, and it was absolutely soul destroying. But when I was doing that, I think I was making like the best part of like 3,000 per month or something. But I literally had like 6 days a week dedicated to 12-hour shifts, one day to actually spend time with all my family, maintain a relationship, and actually give my and it was mostly spent crying and drinking. So you like see to go from that to now, they go, I think I'm making probably, say on a good month, I'll make about 1,200 a month. And I mean, I've had to make cutbacks for bills and all that, but that may be a substantial pay cut, but I have never been fucking happier in my life. Like the money's only real to a certain degree. It's like, yeah, on paper I had all these luxuries, but mentally I couldn't spend it. The check that I mentally could not spend, like, you know. So even though I'm taking this cut, like I've never been happier, and that's like something that I always try to tell people as well. Like, I do genuinely mean it when I'm like, I would not be doing this had you guys not just decided to listen to me or share it or do whatever it is you do, man. So something that I'll never take for granted.
It's got to be strange for the both of you. There's this thing where you make music because you have to. You're driven to do it, and you put it out there, and you're like, maybe it'll, we'll just see what happens. And to both of you being at a point where you make a living and people talk to you about it, it's got to be this weird feeling of like validation, but like it's got to improve your confidence. Obviously, like you're doing something right because you make enough money to make a living. How does that affect your creative process? Does it? I mean, being able to be a professional musician, how does that affect your process? Matt, I know that you do, scores and working on a lot of other projects. But like your truly creative projects where it's you expressing yourself, and it's almost, now it's not gonna be for you. You talked about when you release something, it goes into the world and it's no longer yours, it's everybody else's. And you know that now, and you know that there's gonna be a certain level of reaction to whatever you guys put out.
Well, would you like to go first on that, Matt?
No, you go ahead.
Hold on. Well, I don't. It's going to sound so stupid, almost like I'm trying to be humble here, but to be honest, man, I think because for the longest time, it was a very personal thing. Like I still put in the same amount of effort writing music back when I had like 2 followers, and no one knew I existed under a different alias. I put in just as much effort at that time because to some degree, I'm not, in fact, yeah, to be honest, I might sound like a dick, but I've always written music for myself. It's always been for me. It's like, if I think it sounds good, then I've written it for me. I never want to like bend for anyone else and make it for them. So the fact that it's like, yeah, oh my God, the fact that it still really hasn't set in that I get paid for this. Really, like, I don't know how I got to this point. I know I will say I've gotten a little bit better recently at being like, right, bro, you put 10 years into working towards this, and you've done a lot of work, and you've done it around terrible office jobs and around balancing your life. So it's like, right, maybe give yourself some credit. I'm getting a little bit better at that. It's like, right, you might actually be okay at this. That might surprise you, right? Like you'd think that would have set in maybe before you got signed to an indie label and that kind of thing. You would hope that was saying, but so right now, no man, I just like to stick to my schedule, write music the same way that I would, and particularly with In Motion 2 again, put out what I want to put out, as opposed to like, I would rather write something that I personally am proud of than bend to fit it into a genre or a subgenre in an attempt to get more plays out of it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, yeah, you can write singles to do that shit. You can do that if you want, but I don't know. I personally just like, I want to keep putting out something fresh, man. I want to be an electronic artist. Like, it's not like, I'm happy getting the money for it, but as I said, like when we first started this conversation, my pipe dream, all of this, is to one day be someone's Boards of Canada, like someone to actually look at and be like, that way you can listen to something, you'll be like, oh man, that kind of sounds like Calm Truth. Oh, that kind of sounds like this artist that these established. It would be cool to at one point, just for at least one fucking time, just be like, oh yeah, that sounds like Memorex. That's the end goal. So I feel that if I keep putting out the same thing, same style, not venturing from that, you're not going to invade Deck, man. So
I think people are probably already doing that. I think it's probably safe to say.
Yeah.
I don't believe it.
No, I mean, just piggybacking off what you're saying, like, I think that it doesn't change anything. And I venture that I would guess, it's funny, the more that you talk, the more I'm like, we might be the same person. But I think that, like, I devoted a ton of time from those early days of like listening to Squarepusher and all that kind of stuff. And I had no money, and my parents certainly were not going to drop money for me to buy drum machines and synthesizers and stuff. So, I mean, I had a PC and I downloaded a impulse tracker. I was using a tracker. That's how I learned to make music. And
I used Xcraft 5, a demo version.
I mean, it was free, and you could, and it had a kind of a community. And so I just started trying to figure out, I knew that I could program things quickly in it. And that's what I was after, because I was, trying to figure out this whole warp thing. And so I think for me, I always just kept my head down. Even when I went to school for music, it was like, I knew a lot of people who were in school with me who had grand ambitions, but then would just sit around and smoke weed all day and not do anything. And
I was victim to that for a long time.
Sure, but I mean, like, taking the weed out of the equation, even then, I think that there's a certain level of drive that has to happen.
Yeah, man. Because I mean, like, if you sit around and just keep saying that, oh yeah, I'm going to do something, like. Yeah,
well, it's like the 10,000 hours argument, right? For mastering anything. Like, and I think, a lot of people think that becoming good at something is a straight line, that's the trajectory, which is not true, really. It's more like a stair step, and you have a breakthrough and then you plateau. And I think a lot of people plateau and they just die because
a lot of people fall victim to the whole, so why even try? I'm not good at it, so why keep trying? Yeah. When, I mean, I think, and you've probably done the same as well, but I don't know how many people you've told where you're just like, you have to have a passion for it. And I know that's a bit of a buzzword, a bit of a like Instagram fucking self-help, bicep on the poster, fucking clapping emoji, whatever you want to say. I know that word is thrown around a lot, but legitimately, like, I know it'll be the case for you. If you tomorrow were like, yeah, I'm going to quit, I'm not going to do this again, you physically wouldn't be able to stop. Because this is your outlet, this is your hobby. You'll end up back in the studio working on some sounds. Like, physically, you could not quit if you wanted to. It's your drug. It's your whatever fucking buzzword you want to put on it. Well,
it's like a strange. I mean, it's a strange thing too. Like, it's a lot of times you're sitting in a room full of blinking lights and wires and shit, and I think that a lot of times,
fantastic.
No, but I'm saying, like, a lot of times all that space is designed in such a way that it's like when I sit down and I make music, it's less about, oh, I'm sitting down, I have this formed idea of like what I want to do. Sometimes that exists, but most of the time I would say it's more like it's a conversation. You sit down and you kind of go through and you hear some sounds or something stimulates the whole thing, and then it happens. But the whole experience is more like a handshake than it is like a like a dictatorship. It's not like I sit down and I'm like, I want this here and this here. And then I've seen producers talk about, oh, this is what I did and this is why I did it and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I wish I had that acumen. I don't. I mean, for me, everything feels very accidental most of the time, but I also just trust my gut and just do what I think feels right for me,
It's so funny you should say that, actually, because I got a message on Instagram from a fan. It was maybe like a week or two ago, and I mean, fair enough, right? Because I mean, it's my most popular track, right? It's Curious Alice. It's the one that everyone knows. But I just love it because obviously, I mean, the guy's a talented producer. He was, from at least what I saw. But he messaged me and he was just like, he was asking for, like, tips. He's like, how did you make this lead sound? And like, what ratio did you use on this? And what synthesizer was that? And what was your cutoff? And right? And it was just like, see, trying to like breaking the illusion of being this talented, fucking, I don't know, all-seeing.
You said, I have no idea.
Oh, no, because I was just like, that track was actually written, I shit you not, in the corner of a room with the light off. The laptop was on a step ladder because I'd just been painting. And I made all of the chords by, actually, like, the physical keyboard on the laptop is in the QWERTY keyboard.
Yeah.
I used musical typing for that to write the chords.
Oh, wow.
And put it all together in what must have been about 8 hours in a darkened room in the corner. And I was like, and they were like, oh man, what synth was that Serum? Was that Serum, bro? And I was like, it was actually a VST that I stole about 12 years ago from the free copy of Mixcraft 5 that I downloaded. I noticed that the VST library was unprotected, so I have just dragged it and I've kept it. It's called Messiah. It's like Memory Moon Messiah. That VST file was unguarded, and that is what I still use today on for a lot of my chords. Is that, and it was just almost like I felt bad because I kind of done myself a disservice by saying this information because.
Hey there, TPA listeners, Eric here. Sorry for interrupting, but this is the part where we do some shameless self-promotion. And we'd like to give our sincere thanks for listening to the show. And we are just as surprised as you are for listening. But since you're here, we'd like to highly encourage you to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, for all things The Paradise Arcade, you can also visit us on theparadisearcade.com. Please like, share, and review our episodes. We like interacting with you. We like to hear your feedback. What's your favorite part of the interview? What you thought was interesting? Who we should get on the show next? Those are all important things that we'd like to hear. And the last thing, if you really like the show and you want more and you want to contribute, you could do something for us. You could find us on Patreon. You can contribute as little or as much as you want. On Patreon, you'll find some exclusive content that we will continue to update. Mostly, we just want to say thanks for listening. We appreciate you. So let's get back to it.
I mean, there you go. You've got a brand that you want to think of. You want to come across a little bit cool, that way, like a little bit mysterious. Like, oh yeah, these complex, diminished 9 minor chord, and instead, I'm just like, you just kind of seen the reality dawn upon this poor fellow as he's just like, this strange bearded man from the internet wrote this in the corner of a darkened room in Paisley on a step ladder.
Was it a wooden ladder or an aluminum ladder? It was,
yeah, and I actually got a splinter from it.
It reminds me, Comtrue's actually, he was talking about Galactic Melt and how he made it. And he, very similar, he was using an old version of Reason, doing all these weird things, not really knowing what he was doing per se, to the point where he couldn't make that same record today. It's physically impossible. It was just a product of its time, who he was. And it sounds like very similar for both of you guys. You sit down, you have the conversation with the music, the sounds, and then it just happens. I mean, obviously it's more to that, but you develop this idea and it develops, but it's not this predetermined, well, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and it's going to be in this key, and then I'm going to have this transition here, and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
You just feel it. Yeah.
You feel it. And I think that's a really interesting... There's a difference between commercial art, which is much more overly produced, and creative art, musically. And I think people that lean into that, who they are, you get these interesting sounds, these different things, because you can't, if you just let yourself produce the music, you can't help it. It's a summation of everything that came before you. So with you, Sean, growing up where you did, with the sounds that you grew up with the community that you grew up in, you're not forcing it. It just is. And so it comes out in a particular way. And same with you, Matt, where it comes out as it is. And obviously the both of you have developed acumen over time and developed more skills and understanding, but maybe the process is probably fundamentally the same, sitting down, having that conversation.
So on the note of what you just said there, like I've had the privilege of speaking with Seth, with Comtrues, very lightly, like over message, like maybe once or twice, but even then it was still an honor in that. But basically, like Comtrues, obviously a huge influence on myself. I actually distinctly remember seeing him in London. My friend, one of my best friends, Darren, he is a huge fan of Comtrues, introduced me to him, and then he said he was going to London to see him. I came along, and the man blew my mind for about an hour, and I was once again one of these moments I was like, holy shit, I never knew these sounds existed. And then I was just like, that's also what I want to do. But anyway, managed to speak with them, and I sent him a message basically saying it was actually my friend Dan that got me into your music, and it was In Decay. That was the album that I heard, and I was basically telling him it was when In Decay 2 came out, and I was like, me and my friend Dan were having a couple of beers and we're listening to it, and I was like, and he's basically the reason why I know you, sort of thing. And we actually got to talk a little bit about the production of that album. And if I couldn't be any more impressed, he done. And Matt, I know you will be like, wow, because this is a feat, right, amongst producers. And we don't talk about this, but this is an impressive one. For In Decay 2, I was like, is this all fresh material, or is this stuff that you wrote at the time of In Decay and you went back and touched it up? And he was like, I went back and touched it up. And I was like, I personally find going back to old stuff that you made, you've progressed so much naturally with your mixing production techniques. If you try and clean it up, you realize that you have like 4 very basic elements running. When you take all the saturation, everything off, you've not got a track. So I was like, you went back to tracks you didn't finish and then mixed it up to the standard of the first album. He was like, yeah, but the humanity was expressed immediately when he said, I will never do it again. It was so hard. And I was like, well, you know what I mean? If you're saying that, I was like, Jesus, I've tried to do that so many times. I cannot do it. So the fact that guy made an album, well done, man.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting we bring him up, and I think there's a through line between the three of you. Seth gets thrown into the synthwave thing as one of the originators, but I think everything that he does is purely himself. He's never tried to chase.
Man.
I don't think any of you guys have ever tried to chase a particular aesthetic and scheme, and I think that's very apparent. Seth's music has really evolved. Matt, so have you've really evolved and changed and experimented, and obviously with you, Sean, the variations of what you're doing. And I think for the long run of expression, that integrity and that sticking true to yourself is one of the things that allows people to say, that sounds like a Memorex song. That's a thing, because you could play in different musical frames of mind, but it's still you. There's still elements of who you are no matter where you're playing.
I think it's a good discipline. I think that there's an element of, I know lots of people who are really good at one thing, right? But they're not, they feel if they stay on that one thing, they're stagnant. So they have other disciplines that they kind of chase after. And I think that's really crucial in a creative field, and that's one of the things I really like. That's one of the reasons, I got into scoring, and I love scoring, because it's a collaborative thing, which me, all the music I put out is just me. And so the idea of having to collaborate with somebody is really interesting. It's always
scoring is something that I would love to do myself.
It's a great, it's an exercise, because you learn to deal with people, good people and bad people. But also it's great because I can jump into that water and swim there for a minute, but then I can get out and go do something else. And I love it because it always changes and it's always evolving and you know, in the same way, you know, you talk about with Reverence, Comtrues and his, you know, mark and the things that he's done within the genre. Like, you know, I don't know that I would have been scoring anything if it weren't for the guys in Survive doing Stranger Things. You know, I think that a lot of people, it opened up the doors to, oh, synthesizers can be on a soundtrack. That's cool. We can do that again. So like it just everybody was all hot to trot to get synths in the room again. And I think that, you know, from a creative standpoint, I'm grateful for that because it means that it never gets stale, you know, it never gets old. And it gives you space to grow and challenge yourself. Just like you were saying, like not going back and touching up an old thing, but maybe, and that's why I'm kind of in awe of the whole In Motion package, because it's like, you know, the idea that you went back and wrote a companion, right, is pretty awesome. You know, it's
I'm just really excited to drop this one in particular, just because when we put out the vinyl, it's going to be for the first time, because In Motion was my first project that Midwest Collective, basically, they gave me my shot, and they were like, well, we'll put out 50 cassettes and see how they do, and they done pretty well, and it's never been re-released physically since. But this is going to be the first time the first In Motion is going to be on record, but side 2 is In Motion 2, so the vinyl is going to be both of them. And the thing that I'm just excited for people to hear is, as you said, I like to look at it as a journey, and it did feel like there was this element of catharsis when I finished In Motion 2, when I think the last track on In Motion 1 is Thanks for Listening, and then the first track on In Motion 2 is going to be called Compact Disc. But right then, see, you can immediately hear all of the work that I've been putting into to improve my production, mixing, and mastering. Just right off the bat, as soon as it starts, you're like, "Whoa, holy shit!" There's like 4 years. They go, look, it's louder, it sounds better. It's just there's so much more treble clarity, better panning techniques, all of it, and I'm just excited, kind of, for people to hear that. But there's also that great anxiety that people will put on the first track and be like, "What the fuck is this?" Then flip it back to side one.
I highly doubt that that's going to be the reaction.
Yeah. Doubtful. But I mean, by then you already have their money, so it's irrelevant.
That's
really
the key. Yeah.
How did you? So this In Motion thing that's coming out on Stratford.
Yeah, be coming out the 25th.
How did you get hooked into those guys?
Oh man, I think it was Drew, well, Andrew at Stratford, and he approached me when, God, I think it might have been Pictures of Purple. No, I tell a lie, it was Away Home, and he wanted to put that on the Stratford Secret Selection.
Okay.
And that was the first time that I'd worked with them. And it was really exciting. And then afterwards, Midwest gave me the opportunity to put out my cassettes for In Motion 1. And then I started working on Pictures of Purple Skies. Took a while to get around to that. But when I started working, Drew just said, basically, like, would you like to give us a try and release that with us? And I was like, yeah, I would be honored, man, because a lot of the artists that I listen to in the scene, I know they go through Stratford, and to some degree, like, I think Stratford, followed by like Eyewitness, or maybe like two of the biggest involved with all these kind of like the sort of indie wave scene. But then it was also just like, I mean, another thing that I'll be eternally grateful for is just the fact that Drew saw a very small track record that I had, and then gave me the opportunity to put out a record. And that was the first time I was like, I mean, it's still crazy whenever I find out that my music's going to be on record. That still blows me. But at that time, I was, are you kidding? Like, I didn't think they would go anywhere. And then he just gave me like nothing but confidence and everything, put it out, and it sold out, and it just blew my mind. But yeah, it was just from that, man. I've always kind of been in contact, but then I mean, I think I've had a verbal agreement with the guy. I mean, but I just, like, he's been nothing but kind to me, giving me nothing but flexibility. Every now and again, like, he'll want to try something out with a label. I'm happy to guinea pig it. If he's trying to do something with like advertising or anything, I'm always happy to like give it a go. You know, like, it's a really good environment, and he's a great guy.
I've found over time, and I'm sure Eric can attest to this too, like, you know, anytime I've ever worked with a label, and I've been lucky, like I haven't really had bad label experiences, but
Mm.
and I've released on a handful of labels, but I feel like the labels that have always been the most just the best collaborative experience for me are the ones where the person who's running the show, just their attitude is like, I just want to put out music that I like. You
Yeah.
know, it's like a real and I've been fortunate. I've released on some larger labels too, but like I think the smaller guys that are just, you know, it's all elbow grease and they're packing everything up and shipping it themselves, and it's
Yeah.
just a labor of love. There's zero substitute for that. Like those guys are just a dime a dozen, and you know, when it comes to dealing with like larger labels and things like that, you just don't encounter that.
Right.
And so I was just curious about Stratford and you know, how you came in to find those guys. You said it's just Stratford and Midwest. Those are the two that you've released through.
Yep. Stratford, Midwest. Yeah, I think the only other physical releases I've done has been whenever I play shows over here in the UK, like in my city or Edinburgh. It goes through. It's just my friend. He's got like it's not even really so much a label as it's just like a collection of people. He puts out little compilation tapes, little limited runs of that, and he also does like a selection of shows around the city to kind of to go along with that. But he put out a compilation tape, and I was on those, which I'm always happy to do, man. I'm so like I have like my fingers and toes crossed that finally this will be my year to come stateside, man. That I cannot believe that it was cancelled. But and the most infuriating thing about it was that the reason I couldn't come over was just because of the travel ban, purely from the UK to the US, US to the UK. That's fine, but the other way around. But then
it's so
my
crazy.
First show was supposed to be on the 31st of October, and then on November fucking 1st, the travel ban was lifted. I was so gutted, man. So gutted.
It was because you were going to play with us, so
yeah.
So that was hard. And you know, Chaz, who's the guy that was helping orchestrate you coming over and doing that stuff. You know, we were sweating for a long time and hoping that everything was going to work out. You know, and that was a mad scramble to try and adjust for that. So it was really disappointing. Hopefully, again, you'll come over this year, and you know, Chaz will be part of that again.
And it was quite cool because I think I was speaking with him, and he actually said potentially this time there'll be a lot more dates as well, which would be cool. So if we're coming over, we actually because I mean right now I have confirmation I can fly. I have my visa already set up from last time. I even went as far as to call God, I don't even know, is it like Homeland Security or whatever call them, and they were like, yeah, we can confirm you can fly over. I was like, excellent, good. I just have to make it there, and hopefully the fucking Omega virus doesn't pop up, man. A variant.
Yeah.
I wanted to loop back around to Stratford, and I just wanted to say that I think like that's a perfect label for you to be on, because I really like how Andrew curates his artists on that label, and because again, he doesn't seem to be so focused on the wave aspect of whatever artist is on it. You know, he has this thing, he has his artists, and they are what they are. And I think you fit really well into that menagerie of eclectic, different sounding artists that all sound very different from each other. And, you know, you've got a lot of artists, you know, especially if you're talking purely synthwave, that are, there's a through line that they're all very similar. And I like the fact that I could listen to something on Stratford and it's going to be a really good, unique experience. That's not gimmicky. You know, it's not the vector grid with the sun in the background, and the fucking palm tree and the DeLorean and all that bullshit. Like, I think it's purely about the music, electronic music. And yeah, the Venn diagram is, okay, it fits into some retro thing or chill or
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is, but that I don't think is the main focus with that label, which I really like.
Yeah, because I mean, like, there's hidden gems on Stratford as well, man, and I actually I feel like a dick for even saying hidden gems because he shouldn't be. In my opinion, I think he's the best artist on that label, and I include myself in that. And that Secret Attraction, I think that guy is absolutely incredible, man. Like, all the music he puts out, I just think is truly special. And I do think it is a shame where it's just like there is a lot more focus on, like, say the wave or what wave genres, the micro genres, whatever you want to call them, that an artist like that can be overlooked. But um, and even in, I think it's more when, not if, with Secret Attraction. Like, that dude is far too talented, man. I listen to his stuff all the time, and I think a lot of people would be quick to compare him to, like, Black Marble, the group that's
Mhm.
signed to Ghostly. I think a lot of people would be quick to compare him to that, but personally, when I listen to it, man, I hear a ton of, like, New Order. I just hear, like, there's just so much in there. But yeah, that was also like a super plug for him. If you haven't listened to him, go listen to him. Listen to all of it, and I'm sure he's got a new EP coming out soon, LP rather, that I'm literally counting down for.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I mean, it's an exciting time, I think, to be in this particular independent music thing. So what I've noticed is that, people sort of put their hitch on synthwave because, even though the fan base is really small, they're extremely passionate. They're going to buy your vinyl, they're going to go to your shows, they're going to follow you rigorously on social media, but
Mm,
that base is really small. And I think now there's labels like Stratford and Eyewitness and some of these other labels that are expanding beyond what music can be and reminding me a bit of like what Warp did or whatever it is, where it's really about innovators within a particular maybe discipline of electronic music or whatever that are
mm.
doing interesting things. And I think now there's more space for it. And I'm so happy that, and Matt, you've been around forever, so you don't really fit into that, but that you're not stuck into, this one thing. Cause I could see you being on a label like Warp or Ghostly. Like, I think you would fit just as well into something
My
like
heart
that.
just palpitated when you said
I mean,
that.
Matt, you can't disagree with me on that. I
No,
feel
no, no.
like it's
I think it's fair because I mean, I always look at it and I see it's an analog, like what the smaller labels are doing now, like Stratford, is very similar to what Ghostly and Warp sort of. I mean, it's a curated experience for a label where they're trying to do things that are innovative, but there's also like the guys who run Warp and the guys who run Ghostly are also first and foremost fans of music and are just trying to release stuff that they like. And I think it's I always think about the wave genres, and I think the goal always has to be that you can be a part of those genres, but you're not making the music because of those genres.
good point.
Mm,
And I think a lot of times the impulse that I return to more often than not is to sort of shy away from the traditional, especially when it comes to like, okay, I made an album and I have to come up with track titles, which is the fucking worst thing in the world to have to do. But then it's like, okay, the artwork and what are we going to do? What's the album cover going to be? And blah, 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 blah. And it's like, whatever it is, I don't want it to be a DeLorean. I don't want it to be a, XYZ. I want it to be, it needs to be personal to the project, but I'm like more inclined to shy away from the sort of
man, you just
isms of the genre.
absolutely nailed it, man. Like,
Yeah.
that was I was very fortunate to work with him on my last sort of mini EP, Lost. The pure
Yeah.
tragic mini EP that was, anyway. But it was an artist by the name of Ben Jones. He's known, well, he's on Instagram, so it handles Visual Dreams.
Mhm.
I always loved his work, and I was very fortunate to work with him. But immediately, as soon as I announced In Motion 2, I knew I wanted him back on board. And I think, well, maybe last week or something, we finally were able to, like, unveil the album art, and I just love what he's done with it. It's
Mhm.
so minimal. It's not anything that you would see like they, as you said, it's not the DeLorean, it's not the grid, it's not Tron, it's not none of this.
Yeah.
But it just has like I just feel that he has been absolutely essential and integral in kind of putting I don't know, like see everything we were talking about earlier about how grey and concrete and industrial my area is. He seems to have done that perfectly in a way, even with the like the sort of poster that he's included in the middle of it, the records, the whole aesthetic. I could not be happier with that. But yeah, I didn't want like the gradients. I didn't want any of that because it's not a gradient album. It's actually very cold. It's very glitchy. Like for me, one of the things I actually wanted to express in this EP was, you know, everyone has this like nostalgic romanticism for cassettes. I mean,
Yeah.
rightfully so. My name is literally fucking Memorex Memories. I can't say shit, right? I mean, I have that. I'll admit it. But I wanted to try and almost kind of create. Well, everyone loves the wow, the flutter, the wobbliness of the tape, the hiss. Everyone loves these elements, the warmth. And I was just like, it would be quite cool to add in the element of a compact disc, a CD, like see all the glitching. Sometimes you got a scratched CD and it will jump, and like just add in those elements. Like take all this like nostalgic package and then basically feed it through a blender, like so it will just occasionally scratch and jump and go back. Like I kind of wanted to. I don't know. That may
Your
sound like
Aphex Twin is showing.
Yeah.
yeah.
I was just
Yeah,
gonna
it may have
say,
sounded like
didn't
absolute
Pilot
gibberish
Priest do
there.
that too?
No, I remember there was what's the guy? Caribou?
Yeah.
Back before
Yeah.
he was Caribou, yet he released records as Manitoba. And I feel like one of the early Manitoba records, at the end of the album, it's like this just cacophony of sounds. And then the CD sounds like a CD skipping, like it starts glitching out and then it just stops. And that's the end of the record. And I always thought that was really beautiful. I mean, I always approach music, and I think this is largely a holdover from growing up listening to IDM and Warp. I personally like music that feels like it's falling apart. I think
Yeah.
there's beauty in that. You know, I think that there's especially when you're dealing with machines, because machines are so by nature designed to do what they're told. So it's like the idea, I mean, part of the reason I got into modular was that, like, you know,
Yeah, I keep looking at that and salivating from time
don't
to
do
time.
it.
That
It's
thing behind
not
it.
worth it.
I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
It looks like it's worth it.
I'm lying to you, but like I always tell people it's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
No, but like the thing about modular that I love is like it's so open ended, and it's so heavily relies on logic and you know, sort of chance and just all the random elements of the more random shit you can throw at it, the more interesting it's going to be.
You can
And it's
literally grab a patch cable and shake it, and it will change the tone.
exactly, and I think
yeah.
but I think learning that has actually influenced how I just look at music in general, because I think there's lots of space for experimentation. I think, you know, even on its most minute level, you know, the wow and flutter of the cassette tape is part of that. That's an oscillation, you know.
Yeah, it's character, man.
Yeah, and so I think there's loads of space, you know, to experiment and to you know, head off in different directions and still operate within a genre, but challenge that genre, you know, which I think is the key. And I think that's something you do really well. You know, it's a space where, and you were saying it like earlier, you know, about putting out new stuff and then having these like sort of errant YouTube comments or Instagram comments or whatever, and they're just like, I don't know. It's like, well, you know, that's fine, but you have to follow where the thing leads you, you know.
Yeah, of course, and I mean it's common sense. You can't please all the people all the time. It's something that's gonna sound bad to someone somewhere. It's gonna sound great to some people, but you know, like if you put something out, if you put yourself out into a creative medium, and expect it all to be roses, and you're fucking deluded, man. Like it takes a while to build up the thick skin, and I'm sure even yourself, as someone who's been doing this for a while, like yeah, you do develop thick skin, but you could certainly, I especially couldn't say that criticism still doesn't bug me. Like from time to time, like it will get through, and it should do, because I mean. So I have no issue with constructive feedback. I have no issue with basically saying like, oh yeah, maybe something to do with the mix, or actually something that is constructive. I have no problem with that, because I mean that's the whole point in criticism. You're supposed to listen to this. It's supposed to challenge an artist and come back. Obviously, the topic of critics within any creative medium is very debatable. I think it's kind of subjective what people think it should they or shouldn't exist, but personally I think it's a good thing to challenge people. Otherwise you can just keep putting out the same shit, get complacent, and then just get away with it and effectively turn it into a product instead of the art form. If that makes any sense.
No, totally. I mean, it's that's the name of the game as far as it pertains to you evolving, and I mean that's all you could really hope for. I mean, but I also like, I mean, I've gone through my entire time making music and releasing music and making a living from music, having a fairly absurdist take on everything, because I look at it and I'm like, none of it makes sense, and it's also not really for me to make sense out of. All I know is I get up in the morning and I make coffee and I come up here and I make music, and then wherever that music goes is where it goes. And if somebody wants to release that, great. If somebody wants that as a part of their score or something they're doing, great. But I'm not going to sit here and like lose my mind because I can't. I mean, I literally don't have the bandwidth to devote to that. And
and you tear yourself apart, man, if you begin to like over fixate yourself on criticism and other people's opinions. You won't get anything done. You'll be too scared to put anything out. Like, and I mean, I personally think the biggest step is, we all start out making some dumb sounds, and you show your friends and you'll be nervous showing your friends. But see, when you take that step to actually be like, I'm going to publish this online, I'm going to put it in a public forum, and you've made that step, that means that you're open to good and bad. I think if you hear that bad and you regress, it's not a good thing, man. It's like you've made the biggest step there. That's it. That's the hard part done. Really, that is it. If someone said it's bad, okay, I'm just gonna keep doing it, like, and I mean, you can. I've personally never been the type of person that would like say, I don't even know what's an artist, a popular artist. I might not personally like it, but I've never been the person to seek out their video on YouTube and be like, "This is fucking shit, bro." Like, and then that showed them going on to the video, giving them a click, and then making the mad sense. But you know what I mean? Like, I don't see the point. But personally, I would just be like, "Oh, there you go." I have no personal opinion of Billie Eilish. I don't hate the woman. But I'm clearly not the demographic that music is. But I'm not supposed to fucking like it. It's like I was saying to my partner earlier. It's like those people that come up and, what do you mean you haven't read Harry Potter? It's like, I'm fucking 30. That's why I haven't read it. I'm 30 and I don't have kids to read it to. Why the fuck would I be like,
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think also like you're speaking into the I think there's a diminished thing that exists in culture now that wasn't there when I was a kid or even when you were a kid. It's like there was an element where you went out and you hunted for things. You went and you looked for some record or a CD, or you had to find thing X, or some movie came out and you really wanted to see it, so you had to go find it. Whereas now everything is at the click of a button. Really, you have access to everything, which is good and bad. I mean, I think you have a Billie Eilish because Billie Eilish is a smorgasbord of so many different influences, and she has, because there's access to everything. Like the kids now, a kid today could go on to Spotify or Apple Music or whatever the fuck they use, and they're going to have access to the entire Warp catalog. Whereas when I was a kid, I had to go to multiple different stores, maybe in a mall, digging through the electronic bin, trying to see what Warp CDs were there. And then you'd see it and you'd go, okay, cool, this looks great. It's on the label. I like the label. I have no idea what's on this. So I'm going to go drop $14 on it and take it home. It may be shit for all I know, but it's like you have an allegiance to a thing because you believe in that thing. And I think that's one of the things that I think is most interesting culturally now, is that because it's for better or worse, you can't get mad at that. You can only
Mm.
say it's the way it is. It's a everyone has access to everything, and it creates
Yeah.
sometimes it creates just clones of clones of clones, but other times it creates a Billie Eilish that's you know weird anomaly in pop music,
Mm.
or whatever. And I'm all for that. I'm like, more weird shit, let's do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the other side of it as well,
Mhm.
I mean, I remember reading a while ago. I think it was fucking Mick Jagger, of the Rolling Stones, said it. It was like that. Uh, Effectively, see the bedroom producer, like the whole, oh, you're right, okay, you've got Pro Tools, you've oh, not even that. It's like you can record whatever you want into your laptop, upload it to a SoundCloud. You don't even need to pay for the pro subscription. You can upload it there and you can start your career from that. Everything's all in this laptop and contained. And when they get all like self-righteous and high up, and it's like, yeah, it's not real musicianship though, is it? It's not real production. It's just like,
Yeah.
back in our day. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. Right, are you trying to tell me that if way back when you and the guy started recording, right, if you didn't have to save up money to go for studio time, hopefully in that time get everything recorded that you want, pay the extra money to have it bounced to a whatever format at the time, to then take it to radio stations, and I hope that you would play it. If you back then someone was like, here's a little box, all of that is in here for free, you wouldn't have taken that.
Yeah.
Bullshit, man. Like,
Bullshit.
I
Yeah.
just I hate that, like constantly fucking just pushing
Yeah.
it down. It's like, you know what I say, like when we're talking about Billie Eilish or whatever, it's like, you know what, go get that fucking money, because it's there to take. People like you, go for it. If
Yeah.
someone
Go for it.
shows
Yeah.
me a song that I don't like at a party, I'm not going to stand there with my arms folded and be like, wow, let me tell you all the reasons why I don't like this. It's like, no, you know what, fuck it, it's not for me, but you're dancing, you're having a good time. That
That's
means
exactly
something
it.
to someone
Yeah.
somewhere. So,
Well, I
yeah.
mean, I remember I remember hearing Charlie XCX, right, for the first time, and thinking,
Mm,
okay, this girl's she's a pop star, she makes pop music. But then reading more about, like, PC music, like A.G. Cook was producing her stuff, and the late Sophie produced some of
mm-hmm.
her stuff. And I'm listening to her record, and I'm like, this is a pop album that sounds like it was produced by Aphex Twin to me. Like, every time
Mm.
I hear, because there's so many weird sounds and things, and they're
Is that
doing all this,
face shopping or something like
yeah,
that? Or...
just doing kind of crazy things to her vocal and like all this
Mm,
kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, do more of that. Like,
go
there's
for it,
no,
man.
yeah, because I think a lot of times there's a limitation. I mean, I see it a lot on the scoring side of things. When I started getting more and more into scoring, people were like, oh, well, don't use your artist name because people think that's weird. Or don't
Mm,
use don't you don't want the producers to come back and be like, it sounds too indie. It's like, that's the worst note you can get, because it's like,
mm.
well, that's just code for, it sounds too much like you, and we
Yeah.
want it to sound like something else. And I
Hans
think,
Zimmer.
exactly. And I think that
Brr.
I think that's part and parcel to the whole. I think David Bowie used to say, like, don't play to the gallery. I think that the trick is to discover what your voice is. And this is the advice I always like to give to people when they're like, I'm just starting out trying to make synthwave, what should I do? It's like, well,
Mm.
write music for 5 years and don't release any of it. Just
Yep. I
run
mean, that's
away.
it. That's
Yeah,
it. Yep.
hide away and figure out what your voice is, and then see if you have something to say.
Yeah.
There's no real rules, but it's so much of it is, it's so much more than just going, I like that and I could do
Mm.
that. That's the big problem. I think a lot of people
Yeah.
just hear
Yeah.
and like, I could do that, and it's like, well, you've compressed an entire musical life and experience into a sentence.
Yeah, I mean, it's like those people. It's like, I mean, you probably done it yourself or heard a family member say it. Have you ever seen someone that's maybe been very heavy, like quite, I don't know, they go put quite heavy in stature, and they lose a lot of weight, and you always hear someone being like, oh my god, how did you do that, like how did you
Mm,
lose all this weight? And it's like, because they see the immediate result, they don't see the like year or two of them having to wear the same clothes that are too big, going to the gym, cutting all this out, all the struggles. They just see the end result and be like, oh my god,
yeah.
teach me, you know, like people just want to see the results. And I often try to tell that to people, and it's just like, oh my God, like, I'm like, how did you write this? How did you manage to do that? And you're like, well, when I was 16, I heard Aphex Twin. I really wanted to be Aphex Twin, tried to just throw whatever drum and bass loops I could get hold of together, realized I'm pretty shit, discovered Boards of Canada, really, really wanted to be Boards of Canada, started an alias called Mr. Sunshine, which I worked on for like 3 years, where I basically became a Boards of Canada clone, so much so that I found my way onto Reddit, and then received the backlash of both die-hard Boards of Canada fans who either ranged from, this sounds great, it's just like a continuation of the first album, or kill yourself. And then I was like, right, okay, I got a little bit self-conscious with that, found out that synthwave was a thing, found out all these separate wave genres, started working on 80s throwback music, was discovered, was introduced to Com Trues, blew my mind, decided to fuse them together, started listening to a lot of Jay Dilla and hip-hop. Lo-fi hip-hop was coming along at the time, 24/7 study things. Let's combine all of those. Oh, wait, that sounds shit. Let's change it again. And you're like, oh my God, right, it's been 10 years. And only now am I like, I think I've almost got my sound.
Yeah.
I think maybe.
Until the next thing where you change your mind. I mean, like, and I think you're exactly right. I mean, you're talking about a long-term process, and that shouldn't be a deterrent to somebody.
No.
You know, but they do need to understand. And I think that's, you know, going back to the conversation about the stair-step model of mastering anything, right? So many people, I think that a lot of people, they get onto that plateau and they want to hack the process somehow. They're like, oh, I'm going to go watch a YouTube tutorial, or I'm going to go, you know, do X, Y, and Z. You know, the people that don't want to quit outright, that they want to like figure out a way to cheat the system. And I'm like, well, there really is. I mean, you can do that if you want to. I don't think that the music will be as powerful. It won't be as authentic, certainly.
Cheat? Did you mean Kenny Beats sauce? Mix your track in one click, my man. That's it. You don't have to write any of the music. You just click that button. That is definitely it.
The worst thing about social media is when you are a musician, because the ads that you get are the most.
I made a video about
soul crushing. Just. For a while, I was getting the masterclass ads all the time, and it would be, and it was Hans Zimmer in his like velvet pants, and he would be like, you know, he's like, music is a conversation, or it's like what does he say? Music's like a question. He's like, there's a question and there's an answer, and then he plays like some weird little melody. He's like, it's a bit of a dodgy question, and it was like this like, and I remember just sitting there and just being like, this fucking. I know,
like, I cannot imagine like ever being in that position. Like, yeah, he's a fantastic composer, very talented, but I just cannot imagine sitting and like, there you go, I'm part of the Memorex Memories masterclass and trying to appear trying so hard to appear profound. Like, you know, like, when you're trying to sound like, I don't know.
They paid good money for that profoundness, though.
Exactly, where it's just like, how do I mix my kicks? Well, first of all, you have to become the kick. Right? That's what you have to do. You have to be the kick, and you have to kick yourself. You're like, shut the fuck up, man. Like, what? Like, I cut about like 20 hertz off, and it sounded good, and that's why I kept it in there. Like, like, that's awesome. No, if any of you guys are interested, or if you've been haunted by those ads, I do recommend going over to my YouTube channel and clicking on a video that I made during lockdown called Pretentious Pricks in Their Purple Rooms, where I just went off on those fucking arcade output. Was it Output by Arcade or something?
Yeah.
Those commercials, and I put it out just at a point of sheer frustration, just because I was so tired of seeing them, and I didn't actually expect people to resonate as well as they did. But I think every producer I know was just like, "Thank you."
The guy hits like one key on the keyboard, and he just makes this face, like it's like just blown his mind. His mind is just been blown by what's happened.
Like, in those commercials as well, where they're like. It's like you'll see them and they push down a key on the MIDI keyboard, like an actual key, and a hi-hat sound comes out, and you're like, guy, why are you sequencing your hi-hats with the fucking keyboard? It's like, you know, there's a mouse, right? Or there's buttons and shit you can say. It's always that. Like,
well, it all circles back to what we were talking about before, which is the cheating aspect. Which is not to say that, you know, one way of making music is going to be better than another. It's more that these companies are marketing it as such, you know, like, oh, here's the secret weapon. You just need our product.
Yeah.
That's like a bunch of loops already, and then that will just make the music for you. And I think that, you know, inspiration is obviously super important when you're creating something, but I think that you know, trying to market things and shove things out into the world and creating content
Mm.
based on this idea that like I'm going to press this one key and it's going to do the whole thing for me is a
Yeah.
little, it's super disingenuous. And I feel
Mm.
like what you do end up with is you end up with a generation of kids that are coming up that are, you know,
That will
watching all the YouTube tutorials
take the
and
pre-made loop, put
yeah,
it
and
into the preset,
yeah,
onto the mixer, and then press the one key, and then go over to your browser and get the chord progression pack that they drag in, and it leaves the 4
it's,
chords of pop in there.
it's a
Trap loop.
slippery slope.
And don't forget that they're owning the rights to all this stuff anyways, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're using proprietary or copywritten things, and so not only are they selling you a service, they're selling you a false idea, and then they
Mm.
basically really own the music anyways because they own all that material that's on that website or their libraries.
Yeah, I mean it's a scary, it is. And I mean it kind of goes, it's still like a little bit, there's a little element of like 1984, like, you know, neuromancer hidden in there somewhere, I'm sure, but like I think that it's all, I think it's all relative. And I think maybe I'm just being super absurdist about it, but I think that like it's all going to be based upon the output. So, you know, what you end up doing with said technology, that's all that really matters, I guess. And I think that um I don't know, I think there's so much space out there for people to nurture something and make something interesting by any means. You know,
Yeah.
that's what I love about Seth talking about reason. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with kids who are producing who just shit all over reason
I
Mm.
love
and
it.
are like, "Ruh," and I'm like, you know, whatever works, man. If you make
Mhm.
cool music in GarageBand, go for it. You know, like
Yeah.
there's no rules. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, Tom, well, Odlin, I
Mhm.
had the fucking pleasure of him actually coming to my flat a few years ago, and he came down to mine for a week, and we just decided to work on music. And I remember it was also just a bit disorientating as well when he was like, "Oh yeah, like, I learned the chords to, I think it might have been Thanks for Listening." They played it, and I was like, "Yeah," and he was like, "You look a bit confused." And I said, "Well, I actually just used basic chords and then downtuned the synthesizer until it fit those progressions." But anyway, like I remember, like he was just like perplexed because when I was working on this, it's like I had like I love just like basically wrapping about 600 patch cables around my neck and then just going for it. That's my
Yeah.
idea of a good night in, like just plugging this in, seeing what sounds I can get. But it was like I took a hi-hat pattern, which I then put into the external input of my Korg MS-10. I turned up the noise and then took the output of the MS-10 and then put that into a noise gate. I took the noise gate out and then ran it into the input of my Roland TR8 because it has a scatter function on it. So ran it through there, took the output of that back into my patch bay, which I then ran through like various and then I played it, and it was just like a. And he was like, "You went through all of that for that sound," and he was like, "You could have just done this," and I was like, "Yeah, but I enjoyed doing that."
Yeah.
It's like that's the way I like to do it. It's like the amount of people that say that, it's like, oh, all those glitches and everything you could get, like, say, is it Deep Blue glitch or what is it, glitch 0.2 or whatever, and you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, and I'm sure it's great, and if that works for you and you can get the same sounds, cool, but I just enjoy manually mangling music. It's like it would probably be so much considerably less time consuming if I just used the plugins, but I enjoy doing it. So that's
It's
what
part of the
keeps my
it's
flow going.
well, it's part of the it's the like process, you know. It's
Mm.
the journey of doing it. And I think that's one thing people, especially people who are like starting out looking for some quick way to do something, you're like losing a part of that experience, and that experience shapes the stuff. Like it shapes
Mm.
what you're making, you know.
And also, like, I think it's something that I don't know if you get asked quite a bit, but when you were mentioning that, is it like the 10,000 hour mastery thing
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
often hear? I think one of the things that I feel the more experience you get within your creative medium, you don't realize how important it is, and then you realize that is an absolutely essential and integral step to creating anything, and it doesn't have anything to do with mixing, writing music of any kind, and it is your workflow, and it's like how to prepare your environment. And it's like, if you just wake up and you sit down, see, for me, I have to wake up early, I have to go to the gym now, come back, and then I clean the house. I light, like those Yankee candle that wax melts. The house is smelling nice. Everything is done. I make myself a coffee. I have an apple. Then I sit down. I'm like, okay, that's it. Because then I'm like, I'm not thinking of anything else. The place smells good. I can lean into that. Like, I don't have shit to do. But I think like that's something that I've only taken some solace in recently, or some understanding. Like, that's really important. The amount of times where I've just sat down and tried to force something out, but you're like, I'm turning around and occasionally like adjusting my bed sheets because it's slightly crinkled, or like, oh man, I've got to put in this wash load. And so
no,
yeah,
I mean, I think we're the same person. Like, I think that workflow is absolutely, I mean, it's the key. And I think for a lot of people, above and beyond, just like you said, above and beyond any synthesizer or any whatever, how you make your music is so crucial. And how you walk into that space to create means as much as any piece of gear or any bit of music theory. Because you're setting yourself up to either succeed or fail. And I think for a lot of people, that's why they bang their head against the wall and they give up, is because they just can't figure out how to do something. And
and it's like that as well, where it's like the reissues of, like, the Prophet 5 and stuff like that, and it's like, oh yes, it's like 5, it's like 16 voice, it's $5,000, right? It's like $5,000. It's got like 16 voices, it's got all these filters and this, and you're like, yeah, it's great. That is literally my dream synthesizer. I've used an emulator of it like so much that when I actually got to use it at a convention, I could work it inside and out, right? But like, you have to ask yourself, it's like, do you require this? You just want it? Is it going to add into your workflow? It's like, I personally use like a keyboard and mouse, that because that's comfortable. I've got keyboards that have got like the faders and sliders and buttons that can operate, but it's like, from my personal workflow, it doesn't work. The reason I've got an automated mixer with the automated faders, and you can like change all the panning and everything just with this mixer. But the reason I got that more than anything is I think it's sometimes important that when you're mixing, to actually be able to take your eyes off the screen and listen to it. And I find that, like, they go, if I'm able to adjust the panning manually, the volume, hear this just from touch, when I'm closing my eyes, I'm like, that's the reason I've got this. That was an essential piece. But like, do I need an Oberheim? No, I would like one, but I'm not saying like it's stupid to have one or it's wrong to have one, but I know personally, it's like, I have all the hardware synths that I know I'm going to use. Maybe if one comes along where I'm like, I really need this, cool, that's when I go for it. But like, I think a lot of people say, oh, what's the best synth to start writing synthwave? And you're like, there's not an answer to that. It's like, you get certain sounds, but
well, I think it's a danger. That's also another dangerous slope that a lot of people, I have a lot of friends who make music, and it's like the gear acquisition syndrome, that people think they have to own thing X to make their music good. That's a lie. That's not true at all.
Not true.
And and it's interesting because, like, you said, like, I'll have conversations with people like, oh yeah, when you made that record, that means a lot to me, like, what did you use and what did you do, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, well, it's just some plugin that I downloaded for and it wasn't anything fancy at all. And again, just like you were saying with Indicate too, it's like going back and trying to recapture magic in a bottle is 99.9% of the time is impossible. And I think that because it's an experience, and I'm the same way with my studio. It's like, if I'm not using something, I sell it, I get rid of it, because I'm just like, I know that my bandwidth for the space that I have and the things that I have in it, there's only so much there. It's like, I'm the kind of guy where if I go to a restaurant, I always get the same thing.
Oh yeah,
because I go in and I'm like, I don't want to look at the I don't want
to be disappointed.
Well, no, but like decision fatigue, it's like, it's a real thing. Like, I just don't, I want my workflow is like that. When you have a system, a routine, it's there for a reason, because it puts you in the best possible space when you walk in the studio to make your music. You're like, all right, I've had my coffee, I have my apple, I'm ready to roll.
Exactly, man.
Yeah, it's so crucial.
Preparedness.
Yeah. So guys, I think this is a great way to wrap up the conversation. So any other final thoughts before we close it down and go off? I really want to say I appreciate the both of you coming on. Wow, this is like I'm kind of like pinching myself a little bit during this conversation because hearing all of these bits from both of you about how music is made in your processes and really the discussion is like, I feel like I'm in a secret meeting and I'm not supposed to be here, and I'm like oh fuck, they're gonna find me out real quick.
I think you need to give Sean some space to plug his record that's about to come out and talk about where the people can find it and get it. And
Christ, don't say that, man. Like, I was actually just about to apologize there because I'm just like, I know I am prone to rambling and just like being absolutely stuttering.
All three of us,
and then and then on top of that,
you gotta let the people know what's going on.
And on top of that as well, it's like you've got someone that literally sounds like a terrible Mike Myers impersonation about a green man who lives in a certain swamp, right? So I'm over here trying to regulate the speed in which I'm talking and then trying not to. But yeah, hopefully your audience, you got subtitles?
I understood every word, so you're fine.
Yeah.
No, but it's been an absolute pleasure to be on, man. Like I said, I've been following Paradise Arcade for a while, and I've listened to some of the interviews, so it's really, really cool to actually be on here and finally actually speak with you face to face as well. I think we've only existed over messages for some time, so yeah, I've had a blast, man. I apologize. Sorry, I appreciate you guys putting up with me. But yeah, I'm supposed to be a professional businessman now.
Yeah, plug your shit.
Listen up, kids. Grab your mom's credit card and no. But really, really excited, man. 25th of this month, 25th of February, we are gonna have In Motion 1 and 2 on one sexy piece of wax. There's going to be 2 color variants of that. We're also going to be doing a run of cassettes from Stratford. And then something I'm so happy about is that I'm also working with my good friend Joe over at Puget Sound Collective, just a fledgling new upstart indie label. And I mean, I owe a lot to Joe, mostly just like a lot of mental support and everything over the years. So any way I can give back. But the thing I'm really, really excited about is we're also doing a limited run of cassettes on Puget Sound, and they will be a unique wrap. Like it looks so cool. Like some of the photos that I took for like the promo pictures for the album, they're actually wrapped around the physical cassette. It looks so sick, nice. Man.
Wow.
And there's this thing in Glasgow. It's actually known like it's called the Clydeport crane. It's like just a huge crane that's it was kind of like a monument back in the day. It's disused now, but it's just kind of sitting there. It's kind of like an unofficial landmark, but on one side of the cassette, it looks like that crane is wrapped around it, and I was just so happy with that. But yeah, so all of that's coming out on the 25th. It is going to be streaming absolutely everywhere. Cool. We're also going to have a debut on Electronic Gems as well. We're going to have 2 of those. So we're going to have 86th with the super talented Timo. That's going to be debuting on there. And then later we're going to have Liminal Space. And if I've got time to plug and maybe actually for once give myself some kind of pat on the back of self-confidence, to me, I personally think that Liminal Space is the most competent thing I've ever written musically. And I'm being serious. Like, it actually has a fucking bridge. I've never written a bridge in my life. I was so excited. Like when I played that back, I was like, "Holy shit, that's a bridge!" The chords just changed for a second, and now it's back. Wow, the miracle of 10 years of training for a single bridge. But yeah, very, very excited, man.
It's awesome. And of course,
I look forward to experiencing the experience of that bridge.
There you go. You know what I'm talking about.
I do.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, my man's going clear. He's going up the bridge.
No, man, it's been really good to meet and talk to you, and congratulations, man, on all of it. I think it's all great stuff, and it's cool
Yeah.
to see what you're doing.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much, man. It's a little bit overwhelming, man. It's
Yeah.
very positive.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Matt, for subbing in for Kyle. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right.
Likewise, man.
Till next time, this is Eric. Take care, folks. All right, we're done recording.